it will require boots on the ground to take the fight to ISIL on the ground in Syria. That is the way that we can ensure that we are effective in denying them a safe haven in Syria. But certainly the use of American and allied military airstrikes would have an effect, even a substantial effect, on degrading the capacity of ISIL.
On boots on the ground, how do you react when his former Secretary of Defense, Bob Gates, says you can't win, you can't destroy ISIS without having U.S. combat troops on the ground?
Well, I think that's consistent with what I just said. That it is going to require combat boots on the ground to take the fight to ISIL in Iraq and in Syria.
He's suggesting U.S.
Well,
Syrian
I didn't see the entirety of his remarks. I'm not sure that that's exactly what he was implying.
The president is putting himself in a trap, so it didn't sound like he was saying count on the Syrian rebels. He said the president's headed for a trap.
There is a basic strategy that the president has laid out, and it does include boots on the ground. The question is, whose boots on the ground is it going to be? They are not going to be U.S. boots on the ground engaged in combat operations in Iraq and Syria. What we can do, and what the president believes we should do, is ramp up the assistance that we provide to Iraqi and Kurdish security forces, ramp up the assistance that we provide to the Syrian opposition, so that they can take the fight on the ground to ISIL in their own countries.
The last one on that point, your exchange with John, if U.S. troops are forward deployed, as you say, alongside Iraqi troops, giving tactical guidance, and these U.S. troops are fired upon by ISIS, are the U.S. troops to do nothing?
U.S. troops will have rules of engagement. They always do when they enter a situation like this.
Would they fire back at ISIS?
And again, I'm not going to detail those rules of engagement. The Department of Defense can do that for you. But certainly the Commander-in-Chief would expect that the American troops do what is necessary to defend themselves.
That would be in combat. If they're defending themselves and they're firing back, they're in combat.
Well, Ed, as I described earlier, the principal responsibility of these American troops would not be to personally or directly engage the enemy in combat.
Not their principal responsibility, but they can be drawn into combat as a point.
No, that's not how I would describe it. This is another, I think, useful data point. This strategy that the president has laid out, this counterterrorism strategy that involves, on occasion, the forward deployment of some military personnel who are not engaged in combat operations, is consistent with the counterterrorism strategy that we've used in other places.
But they're on the ground and they're in a combat zone. Or are you saying they're in some other area?
Well, I think it will depend. It will depend on exactly what the scenario is, exactly how far.
So how do you know for sure that they're not in combat if you have to figure out what the scenario is?
Again,
my question is more, if you have the Iraqi soldiers there fighting ISIS, who the president has called these awful terrorists, and they're firing upon them, that sounds like a combat zone that U.S. troops are in.
Iraq is a very dangerous place, and American military personnel will have the equipment that they need to defend themselves. But what their role will be, and this is what's really important for people to understand, their role will not be to roll across the border in a long line of tanks to occupy significant territory in Iraq. Their role will be to provide advice and assistance to Iraqi security forces who are taking the fight on the ground against ISIL. In some cases, that could mean being on the ground in forward deployed locations to call in airstrikes.
That's not your role at first, but when you're in a combat zone, your role can change, right? Isn't that what General Dempsey is suggesting? Your role can change.
Well, I think the environment in which you're operating could change, but their role specifically would be to offer advice and assistance to the Iraqi security forces who are taking the fight on the ground to ISIL. Chris?
Thanks, Josh.